Flight 709 had been in the air for almost 3 hours, sunlit clouds rolling gently beneath the wings as the massive aircraft cruised comfortably at 33,000 feet. Inside the cabin, everything felt routine, the kind of peaceful, uneventful flight passengers hoped for. The faint hum of engines blended with soft conversations, clinking utensils, and the occasional giggle from children playing with their tablets. The smell of warm dinner trays floated through the aisles. Attendants smiled politely as they served drinks, and most passengers had settled into movies, books, or sleep. In seat 14A, pressed against the window, sat Ava Carter, an 18-year-old girl with big headphones and bigger dreams. Her curly brown hair fell loosely over her shoulders, and her eyes sparkled with the excitement of her first solo international trip. She wasn't just listening to music, she was imagining herself flying above those very clouds, because unlike most teenagers, Ava had a secret. She knew how to fly, not jets like this, no. But her father, a retired Air Force pilot, had taught her everything he knew. From the age of 13, Ava spent weekends at a small private airfield, sitting in cockpits memorizing instruments, practicing maneuvers on simulators, and flying light aircraft under her father's watchful eye. She had logged dozens of unofficial hours, but this, a full-size commercial passenger jet with 300 people on board. Even in her wildest dreams, she never imagined she'd have to touch one. Ava tapped her fingers to the beat of her song, unaware that the normal world around her was about to shatter. The moment was so sudden, so violent, it silenced the entire aircraft. A deep thud reverberated through the fuselage, not like turbulence, not like an engine shift, but something heavier, more final. Ava's headphones slid down her neck as she sat upright. Passengers looked around, confused. A mother clutched her child. A man paused his movie. The attendants froze mid-step. Then came something far scarier than the thud. Complete silence from the cockpit. Ava knew enough about aviation to understand that silence was never good. Before she could remove her headphones completely, the cabin intercom crackled alive. But it wasn't the steady, calm voice of the captain arranging weather updates or altitude info. It was shaky, frightened, almost breaking. "Ladies and gentlemen, is there any trained pilot on board?" The words punched through the cabin like ice. Gasps filled the aisles, a few people screamed, someone dropped a glass, panic spread faster than wildfire. The attendants ran toward the cockpit, whispering in hushed, terrified tones. Ava felt her stomach twist. Her father always told her, a real pilot isn't made in the sky. A real pilot is made in the moments when everything goes wrong, and you don't run. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it over the alarm beeps echoing faintly from the flight deck. She gripped the armrest, trying to steady her breath. This can't be happening. Not here, not to me. But the voice on the intercom came again, this time breaking completely. "Please, if there is anyone with flight experience, come to the cockpit immediately." People looked around desperately, as if a uniformed hero would suddenly stand up from their seat, but no one moved. A man in a suit shouted, "There has to be someone." Another voice screamed, "We're doomed." Ava closed her eyes. She wasn't a certified pilot. She wasn't an adult. She wasn't supposed to do this, but she also wasn't the kind of girl who watched others suffer when she had even the slightest chance to help. She stood up, rows of shocked faces turned toward her as she stepped into the aisle. The passengers stared at this teenage girl walking with trembling but determined steps. She could almost hear their thoughts. "She's too young. She can't possibly help. What is she doing?" But Ava walked on. As she approached the front, the head flight attendant rushed toward her. "Miss, please sit down. It's not safe." Ava's voice cracked, but she forced strength into it. "I have flight experience." The attendant blinked. "What?" "I fly small aircraft. I've done simulator training for jet procedures. I might be able to help." They stared at each other for a long second. Around them, terrified passengers murmured, cried, prayed. The attendant finally exhaled shakily. "Come with me." Ava followed her into the narrow cockpit doorway. What she saw inside made her blood run cold. Two pilots, the captain and co-pilot, lay slumped over their controls, unconscious. Oxygen masks hung unused above them. Red warning lights flashed across the entire instrument panel. The autopilot had disconnected. The plane was essentially flying blind. Ava swallowed hard and stepped inside. Despite everything, despite the horror, something familiar stirred inside her. Muscle memory, instinct, training her father drilled into her since childhood. She gently lifted the captain's arm off the yoke, her hands wrapped around the controls, trembling at first, then steadying as she reminded herself, "You know the basics. You know the sky. You can do this." She grabbed the radio. Her voice wavered at first but grew stronger. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Flight 709. Both pilots are unresponsive. I repeat, both pilots are unresponsive. I need guidance." The radio crackled. "Flight 709, identify yourself. Who is at the controls?" Ava took a breath. "My name is Ava Carter. I have experience flying small aircraft. I need help flying this jet." There was a pause, long enough for fear to grip her throat. "Then, okay, Ava, we're with you. We'll guide you step by step. You're not alone." The next 30 minutes were the most intense of Ava's life. The controller's calm, professional voice became her lifeline. "Stabilize your pitch, adjust your throttle, keep the nose level, good." Ava followed every instruction with laser focus, her palms sweating, breath shallow. Alarms beeped, engines roared, and the jet shook from turbulence. The slightest mistake could send 300 lives plunging toward disaster. Behind the cockpit door, the passengers waited in terrified silence. Every bump, every tilt of the plane made someone cry out, but Ava didn't hear anything except the controller's voice and the pounding of her own heartbeat. "Okay, Ava, we're lining you up for landing." "You're doing great, but I've never landed anything this big," she whispered, tears forming. "You can. You will. Just trust your training." She thought of her father, his smile, his voice telling her, a good pilot doesn't need certainty. Just courage. She tightened her grip. "Let's finish this." The runway lights appeared through the clouds like a glowing pathway of hope. Ava's heart hammered so loudly she thought the whole plane could hear it. "Lower your flaps, reduce throttle, good, now keep her steady, easy." The ground rushed toward them, the jet trembled violently, passengers screamed, the landing gear thudded open. "Okay, Ava, flare now." She pulled back gently. The jet hit the runway with a heavy boom, bounced dangerously, then slammed down again. Ava fought the controls, pushing the brakes with all her strength. The plane screeched, rattled, groaned, then finally stopped. Silence. Deep, stunned, overwhelming silence. For a moment Ava couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Had she really done it? Then the cabin exploded into applause, sobs, and screams of joy. The crew rushed forward, grabbing her in disbelief. "You saved us." One attendant whispered with tears. "You saved all of us." Emergency team surrounded the aircraft, pulling the unconscious pilots out and congratulating Ava like she was a miracle, a hero. But Ava just stared at her trembling hands, whispering one thing under her breath. "Dad, I hope I made you proud." Within hours, the story spread across the world. News anchors repeated her name. Headlines called her the 18-year-old who saved 300 souls, the Sky Angel of Flight 709, the teen pilot who defied the impossible. But Ava wasn't thinking about fame. She just remembered that quiet airfield, her father's voice, and the skies she loved, skies she had conquered when it mattered most. Because on that day, an ordinary teenage girl stepped into the cockpit and walked out a legend. Ava hesitated for just a heartbeat. That single second felt heavier than the entire aircraft rumbling beneath her feet. The world around her blurred, terrified faces, an MURMURED Mao, a BLOOD to prayers ove more freely, the faint crying of a child who didn't understand the danger everyone else could feel in their bones. She wasn't supposed to be the one to stand. She was 18, she was a passenger, she had no uniform, no authority, no certainty. But something inside her, something her father had built in her since she was barely tall enough to see over a cockpit control panel, refused to let her sit still. So Ava stood. The aisle felt endlessly long as she made her way forward. People stared up at her as if watching something unreal, a teenage girl stepping into the role of a savior none of them were prepared to need. Some of the passengers had hope in their eyes, others terror, others disbelief. Whispers followed her. Is she going to the cockpit? Is she crazy? God help us. Please, please let her know something. Someone even grabbed her wrist briefly, a trembling elderly woman. Sweetheart, do you really know how to fly? Ava forced a soft, trembling smile. I know enough to try. Enough. That word repeated in her mind as she reached the front of the plane. Enough. Was it possible to be enough, when nearly 300 lives depended on her? The head flight attendant met her at the cockpit door. Her face was pale, eyes wide, hands shaking as she slid the security latch aside. You're the only one. Ava nodded. I've flown small planes, simulators too. I can try to stabilize things until ground control helps. The attendant searched Ava's eyes, maybe for courage, maybe for a lie, and then whispered, barely audible, God bless you. She opened the cockpit door. Ava had imagined cockpits 1,000 times, tidy, glowing, controlled places where pilots sat calm and confident. But what she saw made the blood drain from her face. Both pilots, the captain and co-pilot, lay slumped forward in their seats, lifeless and unconscious, their arms dangling toward the floor. Their oxygen masks swung uselessly above them. Their seatbelts still clicked, holding their limp bodies upright. Every panel in front of Ava was lit with flashing red warnings. Alarms beeped in uneven pitches, each one telling its own terrifying story. The screens flickered with speed changes, altitude drops, and system messages she had only seen in simulation drills. Drills meant to prepare pilots for emergencies, not teenagers. For a moment, Ava froze. This wasn't her father's small training plane. This wasn't a simulator at the local airfield. This was a massive commercial jet, and she was standing in the front seat of a flying catastrophe. The flight attendant leaned closer, whispering, Do you know what you're doing? Ava swallowed hard. Her voice shook, but she forced her words out anyway. I've trained in simulators, not this, but I'll try. And she stepped into the captain's seat. The leather seat swallowed her tiny frame. Her fingers trembled as she wrapped them around the yoke, the same hands that had once eagerly held controls during her first flight lesson with her father. He had told her then, a pilot's hands can shake, that's okay, it's the heart that must stay steady. Right now, Ava hoped her heart remembered that lesson. She took a breath, the deepest, slowest breath of her young life, and pulled the captain slightly upright, sliding him back enough so she could reach the controls properly. She pressed the radio button. Her voice was unsteady but determined. Mayday, Mayday, this is Flight 709. Captain and co-pilot unresponsive, I need guidance. The silence that followed was excruciating. Ava could hear her own shaky breathing mixed with the relentless cockpit alarms. Then finally, a voice crackled through the headset, calm, male, professional. Flight 709, this is ATC Los Angeles Center. Who is speaking? Ava's throat tightened. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't trained for this. She wasn't a pilot, not officially, but she was the only one left. This is Ava Carter, she said. I'm an 18-year-old passenger. I've flown small aircraft and studied commercial systems on simulators. I need help flying this jet. There was a pause. A long pause. She imagined controllers in a tower somewhere, staring at each other in disbelief. But when the voice came back, it carried no hesitation, no doubt. All right, Ava, we're going to guide you through this. Listen carefully. You're in control now. Ava exhaled shakily. I'm ready. The first challenge was stabilizing the aircraft. Okay, Ava, look at your artificial horizon. Your pitch is dropping. Pull back gently, gently. Ava adjusted the controls, feeling the massive aircraft respond slowly, heavily. The ground far below tilted, then leveled. Good, Ava, very good. Now check your throttle. You're losing airspeed. Her hand moved to the throttles, twin metal levers she had only practiced on in digital simulators. She pushed forward gently. The engines roared louder beneath her feet. Okay, ATC instructed, now maintain altitude, keep her level, you're doing fine. Behind her, passengers had no idea that a teenager, a girl who was probably still in high school, was now the only barrier between them and disaster. Ava glanced back once through the cracked cockpit door. She saw people crying, praying, embracing each other. A mother held her son tight. An older man whispered into his hands. A terrified couple clung together like they were clinging to life itself. She turned back to the controls. You can't fail them, not now, not ever. ATC guided her step by step. Ava, check your flaps. Roger. Reduce throttle by 20%. Done. You're drifting off heading. Adjust left. Adjusting. Every instruction felt heavier than the last. Every second felt like a full minute. Every small error made the alarm scream louder, but Ava kept going. At one point she whispered, barely audible, "Dad, help me," though she knew he couldn't hear her. After what felt like an eternity, ATC said the words that made her stomach flip. "Ava, we're lining you up for landing." Landing. The most difficult part of flying, even for trained pilots. Many commercial jet crashes happen during landing, even with experienced crews. Ava's mouth went dry. "I've never landed anything bigger than a two-seater," she confessed. "We'll do this together," ATC replied. "You're capable. Trust your training." She nodded, even though no one could see her. "All right, Ava, lower your landing gear." She reached for the lever with shaky fingers. A loud mechanical thud vibrated through the aircraft. Passengers gasped at the sound. Some prayed harder. Some held hands. Some whispered her name after overhearing the crew speak it. "Ava, Ava's flying the plane. Please let her succeed." The runway lights appeared, tiny glowing dots in the distance. Ava's breath hitched. "Okay, Ava, reduce throttle. A little more, good. Now watch your descent rate. Keep it steady." The wind buffeted the aircraft, making it shudder violently. Ava gripped the yoke tighter. "Easy, easy, align with the runway, goods, keep going." Her heart pounded so hard she thought she might pass out. She could feel the weight of every soul on board pressing into her chest. "All right, Ava, flare in 3, 2, 1. She pulled back softly. The jet touched down hard. The entire aircraft bounced back into the air. People screamed. Ava fought to keep control. "Hold it steady," ATC urged. "You're doing fine." The plane hit the runway again, smoother this time, wheels screeching, engines roaring as Ava deployed the brakes. The aircraft shuddered violently, slowed more until finally silence swallowed the plane. Ava's hands slipped from the controls as she burst into tears, silent, shaking sobs of relief. Behind her, the cabin exploded into applause, cheers, screams of joy, people crying and hugging like they had just witnessed a miracle. The flight attendant rushed in, grabbing Ava's shoulders. You saved us," she whispered, voice cracking. "You saved everyone." Ava closed her eyes and whispered back, "I just did what I had to do." But deep inside, she knew the truth. She did what no one else could. Ava could feel her pulse pounding in her ears as she gripped the radio. Her voice had already echoed into the world, a terrified teenager calling out a mayday on a commercial jet. And now at last someone had heard her. Ground control immediately locked onto her signal. "Flight 709, we hear you loud and clear." The air traffic controller said, his calm tone cutting through the chaos like a lifeline. "Ava, listen to me. You're going to breathe. Okay, we'll do this together." Ava swallowed hard. Her throat felt dry, her chest tight, but she managed a shaky breath. "Okay, I'm here," she whispered. The aircraft jolted suddenly, pitching sideways as if struck by an invisible fist. Warning alarms shrieked from every panel. Red lights pulsed across the cockpit. The plane trembled violently, bouncing Ava in her seat. Behind her, through the cockpit door she'd left cracked open, Ava heard the passengers scream. A baby cried, someone shouted a prayer. Someone else whispered, "God save us." The terror inside the cabin was thick, heavy, suffocating, but Ava didn't have time to turn around. Her eyes stayed locked on the instruments. "Atk, the plane is shaking badly," Ava said, voice tight. We see your readings, ATC responded. Turbulence is heavy at your altitude. You need to stabilize. Put light pressure on the yoke. Not too much, easy, steady. Ava gently corrected the wings. The aircraft wobbled but slowly leveled out. That's it. Perfect. The controller said, "You're doing great." But Ava didn't feel great. She felt like she was strapped to a giant beast she didn't know how to tame. Every button, every screen, every flashing warning felt like it was screaming at her. The plane lurched again, a new alarm fired. Ava's heart jumped into her throat. "I'm losing altitude," she cried. "Pull back slightly," ATC said, "not too much. We don't want to stall, just give her a little lift." Her hands shook, but she did exactly as she had been told. Slowly, slowly, the altitude steadied. The aircraft stopped dropping. Ava felt a tear escape down her cheek, not from fear this time, but from relief. "You're doing excellent," ATC said. "Now tell me your airspeed." Ava scanned the display. 167 knots. "Good, maintain it. We're guiding you toward Los Angeles International. Prepare for descent within the next few minutes." The next few minutes felt like years. Turbulence hammered the aircraft like waves slamming into a small boat. Ava fought the yoke with all her strength, her arms burning, her fingers aching. She was terrified, but she remembered. She remembered her father's hands guiding hers on her first day in a cockpit. "Flying isn't muscles," he said. "Flying is mind, calm aircraft." She whispered the words now, barely audible. Calm aircraft. The turbulence didn't listen, but she did. She steadied her breathing. She adjusted the controls. She focused. Altitude holding. ATC said, monitoring her data, "Good girl, you're keeping her alive." Ava closed her eyes for half a second and saw her father smiling. In the cabin, panic swelled like a storm. A mother held her daughter so tight their cheeks were pressed together. An elderly man clutched his wife's hand, whispering a prayer from a trembling mouth. A businessman who moments ago looked bored with his laptop now had tears streaming down his face. Some passengers whispered, "Who's flying?" They said a girl, a teenager. "Please, God, let her land us." But Ava forced herself not to listen. She couldn't carry their fear and fly the plane at the same time. "Ava," ATC said, voice firm, "we're beginning your approach. You'll see runway lights soon. Are you ready?" "No." She whispered honestly, but followed it with, "Do it anyway." "Good, that's bravery," the controller said softly. "Okay, turn 10 degrees left, ease into it. Perfect. Keep descending." The plane dipped. Passengers screamed again. Ava fought to stay steady. Lights appeared in the distance, tiny glowing lines against the darkening sky. Runway in sight. Ava breathed. "Good, now align with it. Small adjustments, don't overcorrect. The plane is heavy, give it gentle guidance." Ava's hands moved as if on instinct. She nudged the yoke left, a fraction right, adjusted throttle, watched her pitch, corrected drift. Every second felt like balancing a giant, roaring machine on the edge of disaster. Her heart hammered against her ribs, so loud she thought it might break through her chest, but the aircraft lined up perfectly with the runway. "You're aligned, Ava," ATC said, voice filled with awe. "Now comes the landing." Ava could hardly breathe. The runway lights stretched out below like a glowing river. The jet descended steadily, too steadily. Every inch closer felt like it was pulling her soul out of her body. "Adjust flaps," ATC instructed. She did. Reduce throttle to idle. Her trembling hand pushed the lever back. "Keep your nose level, good, good." The plane roared over the runway. Time slowed. Ava could hear passenger sobs behind her. She could hear her own heartbeat. She could hear her father's voice in her mind. "When you see the runway just beneath you, that's when you breathe." She inhaled deeply. "Ava," ATC said gently, "flare now." She pulled back gently on the yoke. The wheels touched the runway hard. The plane bounced. Ava gasped. Passengers screamed. The aircraft lurched dangerously left. "Correct ID," ATC yelled. Ava jerked the controls, aligning the jet again. "Easy, easy," ATC said, voice trembling for the first time. The plane touched down again, smoother this time. "Brake," ATC shouted. Ava slammed her foot down on the pedals. Engines roared, the jet shook violently, the cabin rattled, everyone held their breath, the runway raced past outside. Then the plane slowed, more, until it finally rolled to a stop. Silence swallowed the world. Ava let out the breath she didn't know she was holding. Her whole body shook. She covered her face with her hands as tears poured freely, tears of fear, of relief, of impossible victory. The cockpit door burst open and passengers flooded forward, sobbing, cheering, screaming her name. "You saved us. Oh my God, she did it. Ava, thank you, thank you." But Ava barely heard them. She stared at the controls, the same controls that minutes ago were her greatest enemy, and now were proof of the impossible. She whispered one soft sentence through her tears, "Dad, I hope you're proud." And somewhere in her heart she felt the answer. The wheels struck the runway with a force that shook the entire aircraft. Bang! Ava felt her chest jolt forward against the harness. The massive jet bounced once, slamming back into the air for a terrifying second. She held her breath. Not now, please. Not now. The jet came down again, harder this time, the entire fuselage rattling like it might come apart. Several passengers screamed. Loose items flew from overhead compartments. One oxygen mask swung wildly above Ava's head like a pendulum. Her grip tightened on the controls, her heart pounded so violently she thought it might burst. "Come on, hold, hold." She whispered to the jet like it could hear her. The wheels screeched, smoke rose from the friction, metal protested loudly under the stress, but this time the aircraft didn't bounce. It stayed down. Ava exhaled a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. But the danger was far from over. "Ava, apply full reverse thrust now." Ground control instructed through the headset. She reached for the levers with trembling fingers. Her hands were slick with sweat. The levers felt heavier than anything she had ever touched. For a split second, the panic threatened to catch up with her. "If I mess up now, the plane overshoots the runway, we crash." But something clicked inside her. Her father's voice. Calm, steady, confident. "Ava, flying isn't about strength. It's about trust. Trust your training, trust the machine, and trust yourself." She grabbed the thrust reversers and pulled. The engines roared to life, screaming backward, blasting hot air across the runway. The entire plane shook violently as it fought against its own momentum. Passengers braced themselves. Some held their breath, others held hands. Then Ava slammed the brakes. Hard, the jet lurched forward. For a moment everything blurred, the runway, the cockpit walls, the flashing lights. A strange silence hung over the chaos, like the whole world was waiting to see what would happen next. And then the aircraft slowed. 120 knots, 80 knots, 40-10 silence. A stillness so complete it felt unreal. Ava sat frozen, staring at the runway lights ahead. Her breaths came out shaky and shallow. She wasn't even sure when she had started crying. But tears had begun to streak down her cheeks, cutting clear paths through the sweat and exhaustion. For a long moment, the only sound in the entire cabin was the faint ticking of cooling metal. Then from behind her, a single clap. Then another, then dozens, then hundreds. A wave of applause swept through the aircraft like thunder rolling across the sky. People sobbed, laughed, hugged strangers. Some pressed their foreheads against the seat in front of them, whispering prayers of gratitude. The head flight attendant burst into the cockpit, tears pouring down her face. You did it," she whispered, covering her mouth with both hands. "Ava, you saved us. You saved all of us." Ava slowly removed her shaking hands from the controls. She turned toward the cabin, the passengers staring at her like she was something more than human. A miracle, a guardian sent from nowhere. Her legs felt like jelly. She tried to stand and nearly fell, but the flight attendant caught her. Outside, emergency vehicles raced alongside the aircraft, fire trucks, ambulances, rescue teams, their lights painting the windows red and blue. The door opened, and cool air poured into the cabin. Firefighters and paramedics climbed aboard, rushing past Ava to reach the unconscious captain and first officer. She stepped aside, pressing herself against the cockpit wall to give them space. But as they passed, each one looked at her, a look of disbelief, awe, and respect. One firefighter paused and said quietly, "You're the bravest damn kid I've ever seen." The passengers began chanting, "Ava, Ava, Ava." The sound filled the entire jet. Ava felt her heart squeeze painfully, not with fear this time, but overwhelming emotion. She had never asked for this, never imagined anything like this. She had just wanted you to survive, to help. To do what she could. A paramedic approached her gently. "Are you injured?" Ava shook her head, though her body felt like it had been through a war. "I'm just tired. Let's get you checked anyway." As they guided her down the aisle, passengers reached out toward her, touching her arm, holding her hand, whispering thank yous through trembling voices. "You saved my family. You're our angel. God bless you. You're a hero." She tried to smile, but her face wouldn't fully cooperate. Her mind was still half in the cockpit, replaying the landing over and over like a haunting echo. When she finally stepped through the aircraft door and onto the stairs, the cold air hit her like a wave. Rescue lights flashed around her, cameras from emergency crews were already rolling. The ground felt uneven beneath her feet. At the bottom of the stairs she stopped. She looked back at the towering jet behind her, the one she had somehow landed. An aircraft built for professionals, for experts, for the highly trained. A machine weighing over 100 tons brought safely to Earth by an 18-year-old girl. People would later call it impossible, but she had done it. A slow, trembling breath escaped her lips. And in the quiet between sirens, applause, and rushing footsteps, she whispered 3 words meant for someone who wasn't there. "Dad, I hope I made you proud." Her voice cracked on the last word. A paramedic gently placed a blanket around her shoulders and guided her toward an ambulance. As she sat on the edge of the vehicle, staring at her trembling hands, she felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. Not pride, not relief, something deeper, the realization of what she had done and what it meant. Within hours, news would explode across the world. 18-year-old girl lands passenger jet, saves 300 lives. The Sky Angel, teenage hero defies impossible odds. There would be interviews, cameras, headlines, documentaries. People would want to know everything: her training, her fear, her courage, her father. But in this moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was the lives saved, the families intact, the world that kept turning because she refused to give up. Ava looked up at the sky, a vast, soft blue fading into twilight. Somewhere out there, she believed, her father was watching. And she felt deep in her heart that yes, he was proud.